hello and welcome to Wild Vittles. So, if you caught my last episode, and it was a very brief just update, it was the holidays, the 4th of July, and I had limited time, but I'm really excited about this next chapter. We're going to go into cookbook reviews, and I'll be generous on that. There is one that I'm going to review I'll include a cookbook, but the resources are online. And so I'm extremely excited to talk to you today about the probably best deer venison cookbook out there, which is Buck Buck Moose by Hank Shaw. Now, you would have to have lived under a rock to not hear of Hank Shaw if you are kind of in the hunting space, especially the deer hunting space. He is a prolific writer, has many cookbooks out there. His first one was Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook. It was a James Beard award-winning book. He then went on to do several on ducks, small game, deer, and fish, and has a podcast as well as probably one of the most extensive online website libraries of recipes that I've ever seen. Now, I will be the first to admit that I don't know everything and I don't know all of the resources out there, but my intent on this is to share things that I think are helpful to other people who are aspiring to be better wild game cooks. So let's dig into this. As I do often, I select this book, I pick it up, and I delve into it for use. And let me just share with you some of the things that I think are fantastic about this book. So first of all, the book, some recipe books are only intended to be recipe books, meaning that they just have recipes in them. Others sometimes go a little bit long on the other things that they can be, meaning that they become a bit of an instructional book on basics of doing things. And if you're, I would say, already well versed in these areas, you're going to flip right through those. I think Hank's book brings a nice balance of the two. I've been hunting deer since I was 13 years old, and so I won't go into exactly how old I am, but decades and decades of experience. So I don't need somebody to explain deer hunting to me. But what Hank does do is start in the beginning, and he really talks about, what's the origins of the word venison. What is included in the categorization of venison. He goes into some interesting topics in this first section around food safety, lead versus copper on bullets, sourcing of your venison. If you're not a hunter, but you want to try venison, what are other avenues for you to be able to do that? And then also, I think, of an appropriate length, he talks about how to take a deer, especially if you're a hunter, from the field to the freezer. And so a processing kind of component, a little bit about the how and the why. Not over the top, doesn't take up too much of the book, but I think that it hits on a right balance to provide you enough information to be able to do it with this resource alone and to come at it from an educated perspective. So high marks from that perspective. Once he jumps in to the actual recipes themselves, he actually goes through it by the cut. He does start with some marinades and some other things like stock, which is actually a recipe from a cut. If you're going to make some stock, you need bones and a little bit of the scraps. And it's something that I'm still perfecting myself, and I haven't yet fully, I would say, perfected, not even close. I have a long ways to go in this area. But it goes through on each of the cuts and provides you recipes. And he will be the first to say, and he does say, kind of his last, installment at the back of the book, he said, look, he wanted to write a cookbook that would be the pinnacle, the overarching authority on cooking venison or other antler game. But there just isn't enough room in a book, and it's just impossible to do. So what he did is he's chosen from around the world, from around many cultures, different kinds of recipes. And what I appreciate about that is it really pushes my boundaries. He has an interesting saying in there. He goes, this is more than just, what is it? He says, backstraps, bacon, and and what is it? The gravy, cream of mushroom soup. Because bacon and cream of mushroom soup, those are two, I would say, staples, especially across the Midwest, of ways that we devour whitetail meat and other, ungulates and cervids. So just a smattering of some of the recipes that you have in there, because, you hear me say recipes inspired by cultures around the world. What do we mean by that? What does that look like? Well, here's just a few. Icelandic venison stew. Sauerbraten, of course, from Germany. Italian venison meatloaf. Cajun sauce, piquant, one of my favorites. Tunisian braised venison shanks, also a good one. This is, not an exhaustive list. There are lots and lots of recipes here. I think you're in for a treat if you try this one out. And each of them done with beautiful pictures, an interesting story along with most of them, and clear instructions. But I digress. Let me jump into my grading criteria, as I talked about last time. And so we're going to do this on 4 different components, completely made up, spur of the moment on my part last time, and I'm going to stick with this. You can argue with him what you like. If you don't like them, you can make your own and start your own damn podcast and video, and you can put out these too. So my criteria were, how useful is it? Usefulness. Do I use this on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis? Practicality. Is it applicable to my life? Scalability, very corporate term. Are there additional resources out there in addition to, the book that you pick up? Because in this day and age, nothing is standalone. And then lastly, aesthetics. I think aesthetics is something important. We all love beautiful things, well-designed things, and it brings an additional, I think, component to our lives that we appreciate. So let me just quickly step through this, and these are not going to be long. But I do want to deliver kind of on an importance basis each of these components as you might be considering should you pick up one of Hank Shaw's books, and specifically Buck Moose. So from a usefulness perspective, I give this one a 5 out of 5. These recipes I use every week. This is probably the top 3 cookbook that I have in my repertoire. And I'm constantly kind of pushing myself. Now, have I cooked everything in this book? No, I have not. Because I go through a lot of cookbooks. I use a lot of other resources besides just cookbooks. I also look on the internet, videos, online recipes, like Hank Shaw's site. So I think from a usefulness perspective, it is something that, and this is my own opinion, it's something that I find useful because of the other criteria. And let me kind of go through that too. Practicality. The organization of the book by cut is extremely practical. And it speaks to the way that I go about both butchering my animal as well as what I decide to cook. So when I decide to cook something, I start by going out to the freezer. And I go out and look at my freezer and see, what do I have a lot of? Or what do I feel like digging out? Be it, a loin, a shoulder, a roast, a steak, whatever the case may be. I start with that cut, and then I think, what can I make with this? And then you go to the Buck Moose, and you look in that section, and there is inspiration for you. Now, I'm not going to tell you that there are, like 300 recipes per cut. That's not the case. But it gives you a great starting point, and it gives you something to experiment with. And while they look on the surface a little exotic, very practical, very applicable, which gets further down into some of the details on both usefulness and practicality. It's well written. There is a very good picture of what I really appreciate, a picture of what the recipe and product should look like, because I like to start with the end in mind. Additionally, clear ingredients. He also generally suggests, because he'll know, like if you're having a hard time finding a certain kind of ingredients, what you might substitute them for. And then very thoughtful, well-worded, I really appreciate this, well-worded instructions to be able to help guide you along. I find, and I'm very frustrated sometimes by poorly written, generally on the internet, poorly written recipes that either omit a step or at the end you get done with it and you're like, I think they were just trying to check a box on this one because it's not good. Everything, and I say this with conviction, everything I have made that Hank Shaw writes down is good. Now, you may have a difference in flavor profile. Maybe something's a little too spicy for you, a little bit too exotic, but it's good and it's well explained. So huge fan of him. And I don't think I mentioned it, but on the practicality, also a 5 out of 5. Scalability. This is where Hank shines as well. Go out to honestfoods.net and you will be treated with one of the best websites I've ever seen on wild game cooking. It has fantastic recipes, nice little kind of a intro article about it, little story. Then you've got the ingredients and the instructions. The recipe itself you can click on to print. If you're an analog guy like myself and you would like a piece of paper to take with you into the kitchen, it prints out very nicely. And you've got even options. Do you want to put the picture in? Do you not want the picture in? You want to save your ink? These are nice things. So a tremendously well done repertoire of recipes out there from an internet perspective. He does have a few, not many, but a few of these kind of cooking videos. And he doesn't say a word. And all you see is hands and a very well lit table and they're cooking, different things. They're very short, but they're very well done, very complete. And so those videos are helpful. Hank has also been on a lot of instructional cooking shows, many of them often for maybe the State Wildlife Agency. One of my favorites is when he was cooking duck. And I want to say it was Arkansas or some state in that region where he was explaining how to cook duck breast. And I thought did it very, very well. So that's out there as well. And then lastly, I'd mentioned he does have a podcast. He's done a few seasons. He doesn't update it regularly. And it's not going to be in a structural, like, this is what we're going to cook. He brings on interesting people and talks about food-related subjects, canning, broader things. He generally has guests to talk to. I find it entertaining and also enlightening. And this is a journey, right, that you're on to be able to expand your mind, your opinions, your views around food, specifically wild game. And this is an area that I think he really shines. So 5 out of 5, also in scalability. And then lastly, aesthetics. This book is well photographed. I thoroughly appreciate the right balance of pictures. Some people call them food porn, which may catch people off guard when you hear that if you're not from the right, maybe digital generation. But there is a lot of that in here because there's some delicious looking food and some action shots. The cooking, I appreciate. I want to emulate what should it look like when it gets done. I'm very much a multimedia type cook when I'm looking at something. I would like, if I look at a recipe out of a book, I'll also go look at some videos and see, well, how do other people prepare that? Because sometimes I like to take a little of this and a little bit of that from different approaches and pull it all together. So, also from that perspective, I would give it a 5 out of 5. So if we average those, and you may not be great at math, but you can probably already surmise this book is going to be a 5 on a 5-point scale. So, you might be saying, Chris, this was a softball. Why did you start with, something that you love so dearly? Clearly you're biased. And I am. But what I would say is that I wanted to start with what I'll call the standard, meaning that I think all my other cookbooks are going to be judged against this one. Now, my opinion and people's opinions of cookbooks is going to be colored by my own life experience, what I hunt, where I live, and what I enjoy. And so deer hunting is a huge part of my life, as is all kind of ungulates, elk, pronghorn, which I know are not cervids, but also fishing and upland birds and turkey and things like that. So from my perspective, this really speaks to me. And, if I picked up a cookbook that was focused primarily on Pacific saltwater fish, I might enjoy the pictures and reading it, but it's not very useful to me. If I picked up one that spoke to eating exotic parts of bighorn sheep, also extremely interested, but not something that I'm going to get to do because I can't shell out $100,000 for a tag to be able to go do that. So this is kind of right up my alley. As I like to say, I'm every man, to trying to seek my way in this world and make my fortune. And I see this book, Buck Moose, as speaking to every man and every woman who wants to be a better wild game chef or cook. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. This has been a shorter rendition, but I hope that if you were on the fence, perhaps you were maybe scrolling through YouTube and looking for recommendations on Hank Shaw and Buck Moose. Maybe you've never heard of him. You have a treat ahead. I hope that I can help, and I hope that you'll come back and come along the journey with me on trying to be a better wild game cook. Until next time, thanks, good night, and good luck.